the crimson dust of Kepler 440 to be swirled like dried blood across the battlefield, carrying with it the acrid smell of burned metal and shattered dreams. Jackson Reed crouched behind the twisted wreckage of a Terran transport, his pulse rifle humming, with barely contained energy as he scanned the desolate landscape. The war had been raging for 15 years, and this godforsaken planet had become its latest theater of destruction. His comm crackled to life. "Reed, report your position. We're pulling out in 10 minutes. Jackson pressed the device to his lips, his weathered face grim beneath his tactical visor. "Copy that, Blackwood. Sector 7 is clear. Moving to extraction point now." But as he rose to leave, a glint of silver caught his eye through the red haze. There, partially buried beneath the collapsed hull of what appeared to be a Zephyrian scout vessel, something moved. His training screamed at him to ignore it, to follow orders and retreat. The Zephyrians were the enemy had been for as long as he could remember. Their crystalline skin and ethereal beauty masked hearts as cold as the void between stars. Yet something made him pause. Perhaps it was the way the debris shifted, too rhythmic to be wind, too desperate to be coincidence. Against every instinct, every regulation, every oath he'd sworn to the Terran colonial forces, Jackson found himself moving toward the wreckage. His boots crunched on glass and metal as he approached, weapon ready but lowered. The ship's hull had been split like an overripe fruit, its bioluminescent panels flickering weakly in the dying light. And there, trapped beneath a beam of twisted alloy, lay the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. She was unmistakably Zephyrian. Her skin held that distinctive crystalline quality that seemed to capture and reflect light from within, creating an almost ethereal glow even in her unconscious state. Her hair was the color of starlight, silver white and flowing despite being matted with blue-green blood. But it was her face that stopped him cold, even bruised and pale, even marked by pain. She possessed an otherworldly beauty that made his breath catch. More importantly, she was dying. Jackson's tactical mind cataloged her injuries with practiced efficiency: severe trauma to the left side of her torso, probable internal bleeding, possible concussion. The beam across her chest rose and fell with each labored breath, and he could see the crystalline patterns in her skin beginning to fade, a sure sign of life, leaving a Zephyrian body. "Damn it," he muttered, slinging his rifle across his back. He knew what he was risking. Aiding the enemy was punishable by court-martial at best, execution at worst. But as he looked at her face, peaceful despite her pain, he couldn't reconcile the propaganda he'd been fed with the vulnerable young woman before him. She couldn't be more than 25 in Terran years, hardly older than his own sister had been when the war claimed her life on Proxima Station. The beam was heavy, reinforced with Zephyrian biosteel, but adrenaline and determination gave him strength. He braced his legs and heaved, muscles straining against the weight. The metal groaned and shifted, and the woman's eyes fluttered open. They were violet, not the cold, alien purple described in military briefings, but warm like earth amethyst, filled with pain and confusion. When her gaze met his, he saw something flicker there, not fear, not hatred, but surprise, wonder even. She whispered, her voice melodic despite its weakness. She spoke an accented Terran standard, each word carefully formed. "You're human." "Yeah, and you're Zephyrian," he grunted, still straining against the beam. "We can discuss the irony later. Right now, I need you to help me get you out of here." She nodded weakly, and together they managed to shift the debris enough for him to pull her free. The moment his hands touched her crystalline skin, something extraordinary happened. A warmth spread through his palms, not physical heat, but something deeper, more profound. The patterns in her skin seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. She gasped, her violet eyes widening. "The resonance," she breathed. "How is this possible?" "I don't know what that means," Jackson said, lifting her carefully in his arms. She was lighter than he'd expected, her bones more delicate than human physiology. "But we need to move. My unit will be looking for me soon." As he carried her away from the wreckage, she studied his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Her fingertips traced the air near his cheek, not quite touching, but somehow he felt the gesture anyway. "What's your name?" she asked softly. Jackson Reed." He paused, then added, What's yours? A shadow crossed her features. Nissa, Nissa. Vorthok. The name hit him like a physical blow. Vorthok. Every Terran soldier knew that name. The ruling family of the Zephyrian Empire, architects of the war that had consumed a generation. This wasn't just any enemy he was carrying, this was royalty. You're the High Regent's daughter, he said, his voice tight. I am, she confirmed, watching his face carefully. Will you leave me now? Jackson looked down at her, at the way her silver hair caught the dying light, at the trust in her violet eyes despite everything that should have made them enemies. His calm crackled again, more urgent this time. Reed, where the hell are you? We have incoming hostiles. He could set her down right now. Walk away. Report to his unit that the sector was clear. No one would ever know what he'd found here, what choice he'd made. But as he looked at Nissa Vorthok, bleeding and broken in his arms, he realized the choice had already been made the moment he'd decided to investigate the wreckage. No, he said simply, I won't leave you. The relief that flooded her features was worth every regulation he was breaking. He activated his personal beacon, sending a false signal to indicate he was taking an alternate route to the extraction point. It would buy them time, but not much. As he carried her through the crimson wasteland, Nissa's head rested against his shoulder, her breathing gradually steadying. The patterns in her skin had begun to glow more brightly, and he could feel that strange warmth spreading through his chest wherever they touched. Why? She asked suddenly, her voice barely audible over the wind. Why risk everything for an enemy? Jackson was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because the moment I saw you trapped under that beam, you stopped being the enemy. You became someone who needed help. But I am Nissa Vorthok, she insisted. My people have killed your people. I have killed your people, and my people have killed yours, he replied. But right now, in this moment, you're just a woman who would have died if I'd walked away. I couldn't live with that. They crested a ridge, and in the distance, he could see the lights of an abandoned mining station. It would provide shelter, at least temporarily. But as they descended toward it, Nissa's hand tightened on his uniform. Jackson, she whispered, her voice taking on a formal tone that made his blood run cold. There is something you must know, something about what you have done. What do you mean? Among my people, there is an ancient law, the soul-binding decree. When one saves the life of another, when blood is spilled and life is preserved, a bond is formed that transcends politics and war. Her violet eyes met his, filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. By saving my life, you have bound your fate to mine. Jackson felt his heart skip a beat. What kind of bond? The kind that makes you more than my rescuer, she said softly. The kind that makes you my intended. The implications hit him like a meteor strike. Not only had he saved an enemy noble, but according to her laws, he had just inadvertently proposed marriage to the most wanted woman in the galaxy. As the lights of the mining station grew closer, Jackson realized that his simple act of mercy had just complicated both their lives, beyond imagination. But as he looked down at Nissa, at the way she fit perfectly in his arms, at the trust and hope in her eyes, he found that he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Whatever came next, whatever consequences they would face, he had done the right thing. The crimson dust swirled around them as they disappeared into the abandoned station. Two souls bound by fate and choice in a galaxy torn apart by war. Behind them, the wreckage of the Zephyrian scout ship continued to burn, a beacon that would soon draw the attention of both armies. Their story was just beginning. Asterisk. The abandoned mining station's emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the corrugated metal walls as Jackson carefully set Nissa down on a makeshift bed of salvaged cushions. Her crystalline skin had taken on a worrying pallor, the natural luminescence that marked her species flickering like a dying star. He'd managed to stabilize her injuries with supplies from his field kit, but she needed proper medical attention, something that would be impossible to obtain for a Zephyrian noble on a Terran-controlled world. Tell me about this law, he said, settling beside her with his back against the cold wall. His rifle lay within easy reach, though he wondered if it would do much good against the forces that would soon be hunting them both. Nissa's violet eyes fixed on the ceiling, her voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting ancient scripture. The soul-binding decree was established over 1,000 years ago, during the age of silence, when our people nearly destroyed themselves through endless feuds and blood vendettas. It was meant to forge alliances, to create bonds that could not be broken by politics or war. She turned to face him, and he was struck again by her ethereal beauty, even in her weakened state. The patterns in her skin seemed to pulse in rhythm with his own heartbeat, a phenomenon that both fascinated and unnerved him. The law states that when one being saves another from certain death, when blood is spilled in the act of preservation, the rescuer becomes bound to the rescued as their soulmate. It supersedes all other laws, all other obligations. Her fingers trace the air near his hand. That strange warmth radiating between them, it cannot be broken, cannot be annulled, cannot be ignored, and if someone tries to ignore it, then both parties are considered dead in the eyes of the law. Their families must mourn them, their names are struck from all records, and they become outcasts forbidden from ever returning to Zephyrian space. Jackson leaned his head back against the wall, the magnitude of what he'd stumbled into beginning to sink in. So by saving your life, I've essentially married into the royal family of our enemy empire. In the eyes of my people, yes. She paused, studying his face in the dim light. But there is more. The decree also states that the bond must be formally acknowledged within 1 lunar cycle, or both parties will be hunted down and executed as oath breakers. 1 lunar cycle. That's what? 28 days, 26, by Zephyrian reckoning. The sound of engines overhead made them both freeze. Through the cracked skylights, they could see the distinctive blue glow of Terran military transports. Jackson's hand moved instinctively to his weapon, but the ships passed without stopping, their searchlights sweeping the wasteland beyond. They're looking for me, he said grimly. By now they know I didn't make it to the extraction point, and my people will be looking for me. Nissa added, my ship's emergency beacon would have activated automatically when life support failed. They'll trace it here eventually, as if summoned by her words. A new sound echoed through the station footsteps, measured and purposeful. Jackson raised his rifle, motioning for Nissa to stay low, but she caught his arm. Wait, she whispered. That gate pattern, I know it. The footsteps stopped outside the chamber where they'd taken shelter. A voice, ancient and weathered, called out in the melodic language of the Zephyrians. Nissa responded in kind, her tone respectful but wary. He says he comes in peace, she translated for Jackson. He is Elder Thane Corvain, keeper of the sacred laws. The figure that stepped into the light was tall even by Zephyrian standards. His crystalline skin bearing the deep blue-green patina of extreme age. His hair was silver white, falling in intricate braids that marked his station, and his eyes were the color of deep ocean, ancient, wise, and infinitely patient. Princess Nissa, he said in accented Terran standard, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. Your father has been most concerned about your welfare. Elder Corvain, she replied formally, struggling to sit up straighter. I am honored by your presence, though I confess surprise at finding you here. The old Zephyrian's gaze shifted to Jackson, and those ancient eyes seemed to see straight through to his soul. And you, young human, are the one who has created such an interesting situation. I saved her life, Jackson said simply, keeping his weapon lowered but ready. If that's created a situation, so be it. Indeed. Elder Corvain moved closer, his movements fluid despite his apparent age. You have invoked the soul-binding decree, whether knowingly or not. The resonance between you is unmistakable. The resonance. Jackson looked between them, confusion clear on his face. Nissa mentioned that before. What does it mean? Show me. Your hands, the elder commanded gently. Jackson hesitated, then held out his palms. Elder Corvain gestured for Nissa to do the same. When their hands neared each other, the air between them seemed to shimmer, and both felt that strange warmth intensify. The soul bond manifests physically, Elder Corvain explained, his voice filled with wonder. It is rare, perhaps 1 in 10,000 pairings show such clear resonance. Your life forces have begun to synchronize, your very essences recognizing each other as complementary halves of a greater whole. That's impossible, Jackson protested. We're different species. We've known each other for less than a day. Love does not follow the rules of logic, young warrior, the elder said with what might have been amusement. And the soul bond is love in its purest form, recognition. At the deepest level of consciousness, Nissa's hand moved closer to his, and Jackson felt his heartbeat accelerate, not from fear or adrenaline, but from something deeper, more profound. When their fingertips finally touched, the sensation was like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. This is insane, he breathed. But he didn't pull away. This is destiny, Elder Corvain corrected. But it is also dangerous. Both your peoples will see this union as a betrayal. The Terrans will brand you a traitor. The Zephyrians will call her contaminated. There are those who would kill you both rather than allow such a bond to exist. Then what do you suggest? Nissa asked, her fingers intertwining with Jackson's. You must flee, the elder said simply. Seek sanctuary in the neutral zones while I work to convince both sides that this union could be the key to ending the war. The prophecies speak of a bond between enemies that would herald a new age of peace. Prophecies? Jackson's skepticism was evident. Ancient texts written before the war began. They speak of two souls, separated by conflict, but united by sacrifice, whose love would bridge the void between worlds. Elder Corvain's expression grew grave. But prophecy is not guarantee. Free will still governs all choices. The distant sound of engines returned, closer this time. Through the skylights, they could see both Terran and Zephyrian craft converging on their location, a sight that would have been impossible just hours before. They're working together, Nissa said, alarm clear in her voice. A joint search party, which means they already know about us, Jackson realized. About what happened? Elder Corvain nodded grimly. Word travels fast among the high commands. They see this as either an opportunity or a threat. I suspect they haven't decided which yet. We need to go, Jackson said, helping Nissa to her feet. She swayed slightly, still weak from her injuries, but her determination was clear. There is a trader's post in the Epsilon sector, the elder said, pulling out a small crystal device. Neutral territory, governed by the Merchants Guild. This beacon will guide you there. Ask for Finstar Weaver, tell him I sent you. What about you? Nissa asked. I will return to the High Regent and attempt to convince him that this bond is not a catastrophe, but a gift. Your father loves you, child. Though he may not understand what has happened. The engines were growing louder, the searchlights brighter. Jackson checked his weapon and scanning equipment, his mind already calculating routes and obstacles. But as they prepared to leave, Elder Corvain caught his arm. Young human, the elder said seriously, do you understand what you have committed to? Not just the political implications, but the personal ones? A soul bond is not merely marriage, it is the joining of two lives into one destiny. If she dies, you will feel it as your own death. If you suffer, she will share your pain. You will be connected across space and time until the very stars burn out. Jackson looked at Nissa, at the trust and hope in her violet eyes, at the way her crystalline skin seemed to glow more brightly when he was near. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was madness, that he was throwing away everything for a woman he'd known for mere hours. But his heart, his soul recognized something deeper. I understand, he said quietly, and I choose it willingly. Elder Corvain smiled, the expression transforming his ancient features. Then perhaps there is hope for us all. As they slipped out into the crimson night, leaving the elder to face the search parties alone, Jackson felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a Terran soldier or a military deserter. He was bound to a Zephyrian princess by laws older than the war itself, carrying the hopes and fears of two civilizations in his heart. The hunt was about to begin in earnest, and he and Nissa would be the prey. But as her hand found his in the darkness, as their synchronized heartbeats echoed in the space between them, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The stars above seemed to pulse in rhythm with their bond, and somewhere in the distance, both armies began. The stolen Terran scout ship Vagrant's Dream limped through the asteroid field of the Epsilon sector, its hull scarred by pursuit fire and its engines running on fumes. Jackson's hands flew over the controls with practiced efficiency, but even His piloting skills couldn't hide them much longer from the Joint Task Force that had been hunting them for the past 6 days. Hull breach in Section 7, Nyssa reported from the co-pilot's seat, her crystalline skin now fully healed but bearing the stress patterns that marked her people under extreme duress. Atmosphere is holding, but we're losing heat. I see it, Jackson muttered, steering between two massive asteroids as another volley of plasma fire scorched the space behind them. How many ships? 3 Terran corvettes, 2 Zephyrian interceptors, and something I don't recognize heavily armed. Unmarked registry. She paused, consulting the sensor readings. Whoever they are, they're hanging back, watching. That worried him more than the military ships. At least he understood their motivations, duty, orders, the need to prevent a diplomatic incident from becoming a galactic catastrophe. But unknown players in this game meant complications he couldn't predict or prepare for. The past week had been a blur of narrow escapes and sleepless nights. They'd stolen the scout ship from a Terran depot, fought their way through to blockades, and discovered that their bond was growing stronger with each passing day. When Nyssa was injured during their escape from Kepler Station, Jackson had felt her pain as if it were his own. When he'd been grazed by a plasma bolt while covering their retreat, she'd cried out and clutched her shoulder exactly where his wound was. Elder Corvain had been right. They were becoming something more than 2 separate beings. There, Nyssa pointed ahead to where a ramshackle space station drifted among the larger asteroids. Finn's Folly. The trading post was a testament to creative engineering and controlled chaos. Dozens of different ship types were docked to its multiple arms, from sleek Altarian pleasure craft to massive vegan cargo haulers. Neon signs in 17 different languages advertised everything from exotic foods to illegal weapons, and the whole structure pulsed with the kind of barely contained energy that marked all frontier settlements. Broadcasting Merchants Guild. Neutrality codes, Jackson said, his fingers dancing over the comm controls. Requesting emergency docking. The response came immediately in a gravelly voice with a distinct frontier accent. Vagrant's Dream, this is Finn's Folly Control. We show 5 military vessels in pursuit. That's gonna be a problem, friend. Tell them Thane Corvain sent us, Nyssa said, leaning toward the pickup. We're claiming sanctuary under Guild Law 7. A pause, then, well, hell. Why didn't you say so, Bay 17, and make it quick? I'll activate the defense grid, but it won't hold military-grade ships for long. As they streaked toward the docking bay, Jackson caught sight of their pursuers breaking off their attack run. The Merchants Guild might be neutral, but they weren't defenseless. The space around the station suddenly bristled with automated defense platforms and energy fields that would give even a battle fleet pause. The Vagrant's Dream settled into the docking bay with a groaning of stressed metal and the hiss of equalizing atmosphere. Through the porthole, Jackson could see a tall, rangy figure approaching, dressed in the eclectic style of a successful trader. This had to be Finn Starweaver. But as they prepared to disembark, Nyssa grabbed his arm, her violet eyes wide with alarm. Jackson, wait. Something's wrong. What do you mean? The resonance sits, muted, dampened somehow. She pressed her hand to his, and the usual warmth was barely a flicker. There's something on this station that's interfering with our bond. Before he could respond, the airlock cycled open and Finn Starweaver stepped aboard. He was human, Jackson noted, but modified cybernetic implants gleamed at his temples, and his left arm was clearly artificial, crafted from some exotic alloy that seemed to shift color in the light. Jackson Reed and Nyssa Vorthik, I presume, Finn said, his voice carrying that same gravelly quality they'd heard over the comm. You've got half the galaxy looking for you. That's got to be some kind of record. Elder Corvain said you could help us, Nyssa said, standing with the unconscious grace that marked her royal breeding despite her commoner's clothes. The good elder and I have an understanding, Finn replied with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. But helping you two might be more complicated than even he realizes. Come on. We need to get you somewhere secure before our uninvited guests decide. Guild neutrality isn't worth respecting. As they followed him through the station's corridors, Jackson noted the eclectic mix of species and cultures represented among the traders and travelers. Zephyrians walked beside humans, Altarians haggled with vegans, and several species he didn't recognize conducted business in the shadows of the market levels. It was a reminder that the war, as all-consuming as it seemed, was really just a conflict between two powers in a galaxy filled with hundreds of civilizations. "Tell me about the unmarked ship," he said as they entered a lift that climbed toward the station's upper levels. Finn's expression darkened. "Ah, you noticed our mysterious friend. That would be the Shadow's Edge, captained by someone who calls himself Kale Nightwhisper. Showed up about 2 days ago, asking questions about a certain Zephyrian princess and her human companion." "Assassin?" Nissa asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "The best credits can buy," Finn confirmed. "Word is he's got contracts from both sides. Some folks want you dead, others want you brought back alive. He's been very careful not to specify which contract he's planning to fulfill." They emerged onto what Finn called the sanctuary level, a heavily shielded section of the station, reserved for those claiming guild protection. The quarters were simple but comfortable, and more importantly, they were safe from surveillance and attack. "Now then," Finn said, settling into a chair that creaked under his weight, "let's talk about why the most powerful families into empires want you either dead or married." "You know about the soul-binding decree?" Jackson asked. "I know. A lot of things. Comes with the territory." Finn's cybernetic implants flickered as he accessed some internal database. "Ancient Zephyrian law, supposedly unbreakable, creates political alliances through life debt. What I don't understand is why everyone's so worked up about it now." Nissa and Jackson exchanged glances. Over the past week, they'd had time to discuss the implications of their bond, to explore what it meant both personally and politically. "Because it's not just political anymore," Nissa said softly. "The bond, it's real. We're connected in ways that go beyond law or tradition." To demonstrate, she held out her hand. Despite the dampening field Finn had mentioned, when Jackson took it, the patterns in her skin began to glow softly, and he felt that familiar warmth spread through his chest. Finn whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned. You two are actually soul bonded. I've heard stories, but I've never seen it in person." He leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "That changes everything." "How so?" Jackson asked. "Because genuine soul bonds can't be faked, can't be coerced, and can't be broken. If word gets out that you two are really connected at the soul level, it'll validate every romantic idealist in both empires and terrify every hardliner who's made a career out of this war." A soft chime from the station's calm system interrupted them. "Finn to sanctuary level," came the trader's voice over the speakers. "We've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" Finn called back. "The kind with pointed ears, fancy armor, and a really big sword. Kale Nightwhisper just docked, and he's asking for permission to come aboard under the Assassin's Compact." Finn cursed. "Creatively in 3 languages, that's trouble. The compact gives him the right to challenge you to single combat, winner takes all." "I'll face him," Jackson said immediately, his hand moving to the plasma pistol at his hip. "No," Nissa said firmly. "By Zephyrian law, the challenge must be answered by the one whose honor is in question. That would be me." "Like hell," Jackson snapped. "I'm not letting you fight an assassin, and I'm not hiding behind my bondmate while someone questions my choices," she shot back, her violet eyes flashing with royal fire. Finn held up his hands. "Hold on, both of you. There might be another way." He activated his comm. "Patch me through to the Shadow's Edge." A moment later, a new voice filled the room, cold, precise, and utterly without emotion. "This is Kale Nightwhisper. I seek audience with the Oath Breakers. This is Finn Starweaver, and they're under guild protection. If you want to settle this, it'll be done according to guild rules, not your compact. The guild has no authority over matters of honor debt." "Maybe not," Finn said with a sly grin. "But they do have authority over souls, and these two are genuinely soul bonded. That puts them under the protection of the sacred union laws, which supersede everything except divine mandate." The silence that followed was telling. Finally, Kel's voice returned, noticeably less certain. "I will need to consult my employers about this development." "You do that," Finn said. "In the meantime, they stay under my protection." The calm went silent, and Finn turned back to them with a satisfied expression. "That'll buy us some time, but not much. Kel's good at what he does, and he's got a reputation to maintain." "What are the Sacred Union laws?" Nissa asked. Older than the Merchants Guild itself. They recog. The Imperial Palace on Zephyr Prime had never seen such chaos. Empress Zara Vorthik stood before the massive crystalline windows of her private study, watching the aurora-like energy fields that danced across her homeworld's sky, while behind her the most powerful beings in the Empire argued with voices that could shatter glass. "Your Majesty," Chancellor Vex Morhein's voice dripped with barely concealed disgust. "The contamination spreads with each passing hour. Already there are reports of sympathizers in the outer colonies. Young fools who see your daughter's liaison as romantic rather than treasonous." Zara's reflection in the crystal showed a woman who had aged decades in the past 2 weeks. Her silver hair, once a crown of starlight, now seemed dimmed with worry, and the natural luminescence of her skin flickered with the stress patterns that marked deep emotional turmoil. "Chancellor," she said quietly, not turning from the window, "my daughter saved this empire more times than you've drawn breath. If she has chosen this path, perhaps we should ask ourselves why, rather than how quickly we can punish her for it. Because she has violated the most sacred laws of our people." The Chancellor's crystalline features flushed deep blue with outrage. "She has bonded with a human, a species so genetically incompatible that their very touch should cause her pain." And yet, came a new voice from the doorway. The reports from Elder Corvain suggest quite the opposite. All heads turned as Mira Vorthik entered the chamber. At 19, Nissa's younger sister possessed the same ethereal beauty, but with a spirit that burned brighter, more defiant. Where Nissa had been shaped by duty and war, Mira had been raised on stories of what their civilization could become. "Sister," Zara said with relief. "What news from the Elder?" Mira moved to stand beside her mother, her violet eyes fixed on the same distant stars that held her sister. "He says the bond is genuine, not just political convenience, but true soul resonance, the kind our ancestors wrote about in the old texts, before we forgot that love could be stronger than law." "Impossible," Chancellor Morhein spat. "Humans lack the spiritual development necessary for soul bonding. They are a primitive species, driven by base emotions and careful." "Chancellor," Mira interrupted, her voice carrying the same regal authority as her mother's despite her youth. "That primitive human saved the life of our future empress. Perhaps it's time we reconsidered our assumptions about what makes a soul worthy of connection." Meanwhile, in the sterile corridors of Terran Command on Luna Station, General Marcus Stone faced his own crisis of faith and duty. The man sitting across from his desk had been like a son to him. Jackson Reed, the best scout in the colonial forces, a soldier who had never failed a mission, never questioned an order, never given him a moment's concern. Until now. "Tell me again," Marcus said, his weathered face grim, "how my best operative ends up soul bonded to the daughter of our greatest enemy." Captain Vera Blackwood, Jackson's former commanding officer, stood at attention beside the desk. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, but her usually composed features showed strain. "Sir," Operative Reed was following standard reconnaissance protocols when he encountered the crashed Zephyrian vessel. His decision to investigate was within operational parameters. His decision to save the princess and run off with her most decidedly was not, Marcus replied dryly. "Do you have any idea what this has done to our position? Half the Colonial Council wants him executed as a traitor. The other half wants to use this situation to negotiate a ceasefire. What does Jackson want?" Vera asked quietly. Marcus activated a holographic display showing the latest intelligence. "Reports, according to our sources, he wants to be left alone to live his life with the woman he's bonded to. Unfortunately, that's not an option available to any of us right now." The display showed images from across Terran space protests both for and against Jackson's actions. Military units requesting clarification on engagement protocols, and most concerning of all, reports of Terran civilians attempting to make contact with Zephyrian settlements. "The dam is breaking," Marcus said heavily. 30 years of careful propaganda about Zephyrian inhumanity, And one lovesick soldier has undone it all by proving they can bleed, suffer, and inspire mercy just like us, sir. Vera said carefully, with respect, maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. Marcus studied her face, noting the way she held herself, the subtle signs of internal conflict he'd learned to read over 20 years of military service. You've been thinking about this situation, really thinking about it? Yes, sir. I've been reviewing the tactical reports from every engagement with Zephyrian forces. Over the past 5 years, do you know what I found? Enlighten me. They've been pulling back, gradually, subtly, but consistently. No major offensive operations in 18 months, increased response time to our attacks. Defensive positions that could have been stronger. Vera paused, choosing her words carefully. Sir, I think they want this war to end as much as we do. The silence that followed was broken by the soft chime of an incoming priority transmission. Marcus accepted the call, and the holographic image of a Zephyrian elder materialized above his desk, ancient, dignified, and somehow radiating peace despite appearing in the heart of enemy territory. I am Elder Thane Corvain, the figure said without preamble. I seek words with General Marcus Stone, mentor to the human who has bound himself to our princess. I'm listening, Marcus said cautiously. Then hear this truth. What has occurred between your soldier and our princess is not an accident of war, but a convergence of destiny. Our prophecies speak of such a union, one that would herald the end of this conflict and the beginning of a new age. You're talking about ancient superstitions, Elder, am I? Corvain's image smiled serenely. Tell me, General, in all your years of warfare, have you ever known a bond so strong that two beings could feel each other's pain across star systems? Have you ever seen love transcend not just politics, but the very fabric of space itself? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. What are you proposing? A meeting, neutral ground. Empress Zara Vorthik and yourself, along with selected advisors. Let us speak not as enemies, but as parents concerned for their children's welfare. The Colonial Council will never approve. The Colonial Council need not know until after the fact. Corvain interrupted gently. Sometimes, General, the greatest acts of courage happen not on battlefields, but in quiet rooms where old enemies choose to become new friends. Back on Finn's Folly, the standoff with Kale Nightwhisper had taken an unexpected turn. The assassin's ship still hung in space nearby, weapons powered, but not aimed, while its captain had come aboard the station under a flag of temporary truce. Kale himself was not what Jackson had expected. Tall and lean even by Zephyrian standards, with silver hair bound in the intricate knots that marked the assassin caste. He moved with deadly grace, but spoke with surprising thoughtfulness. I have received conflicting instructions, he said, his pale eyes studying both Jackson and Nissa with professional interest. Some wish you dead, others wish you separated, still others wish you brought back alive to face judgment. And what do you wish? Nissa asked, meeting his gaze without flinching. I wish to understand. Kale replied simply, I have killed for money, for honor, for duty. I have never killed for love, nor have I ever encountered love strong enough to make me question a contract. He gestured, and the air between Jackson and Nissa shimmered with the visible resonance of their bond. Even dampened by Finn's technology, their connection was obvious to anyone who knew how to look. This is not political expediency, Kale continued. This is not arranged marriage or diplomatic convenience. This is soul bonding in its truest form, the kind my people have not seen in generations. So what happens now? Jackson asked, his hand never leaving his weapon. Now, Kale said with something that might have been a smile, I make a choice that will either damn me or save us all. He activated a communication device, and his voice carried across subspace to unknown recipients. This is Nightwhisper. The targets are confirmed soul bonded. I am withdrawing from all contracts related to their separation or elimination. The response was immediate and furious voices in multiple languages, demanding explanations, threatening consequences, promising retribution. Kale listened for a moment, then calmly shut off the device. It seems I am no longer a popular person, he said mildly. Perhaps I should consider a career change. You just saved our lives. Nissa said, wonder in her voice. Why? Because, Cale replied, his pale eyes holding depths that spoke of wounds and regrets. I once had a soul bond of my own. I chose duty over love, honor over heart. The bond broke, and something inside me broke with it. He looked between them, seeing the way they unconsciously moved to maintain contact, the way their breathing synchronized without thought. I will not be the instrument that destroys what I was too cowardly to preserve. Finn cleared his throat. Well, this is all very touching, but we still have the small matter of 5 military vessels, and what I'm guessing are some very angry employers to deal with, as if summoned by his words. Proximity alarms began sounding throughout the station. Through the viewport, they could see new ships dropping out of hyperspace, not military vessels, but courier ships bearing the diplomatic seals of both empires. Looks like the parents won.